You carry so much regret, it's intoxicating. That's the first thing the man beside me said in the mirrored elevator, foregoing hello, small talk, or any of the standard phrases normal people use when meeting a stranger. Or an intern. Or a very sweaty intern, which I was, judging by the way my palms were slipping on the leather of my thrifted satchel. "Excuse me?" I said, a little higher pitch than intended. He didn't look at me right away. His gaze tracked the numbers above the chrome doors, unreadable. He was tall. The kind of tall that turned an expensive suit into armor. Dark hair, neat. A face made for being listened to. And eyes with a depth that made me think of midnight water, beautiful, dangerous, and you'd follow it too far if you stared too long. I said, he murmured, finally tipping his head toward me, "Your regret is strong. It's almost heady." My heart stuttered. "Is that corporate feedback?" The corner of his mouth lifted, brief as a blink. "Not yet." I told myself to breathe and reminded my knees that collapsing isn't professional. First day. New badge. New building with glass walls and a lobby that smelled like eucalyptus and money. I hadn't come here for lunch hour poetry from a strange man who talked like a sommelier reviewing my mistakes. "I didn't come here for you," I said, because a sliver of pride survived the long night and the longer train ride. "Good." He faced the doors again as the elevator hummed upward. "I came for you." There are sentences that land like feathers and others like stones. That one felt like a stone dropped into a lake inside my chest, ripples spreading into places I didn't know were still sensitive. I clutched my satchel tighter. It wasn't new. The strap had an extra hole I'd punched with a thumbtack, and the stitching inside the flap was uneven where my grandmother had mended it. The suit wasn't new either. Navy, a little shiny if the lighting was too honest, which the elevator lighting absolutely was. He didn't speak again, which felt like a dare. I tried counting my breaths. 1, 2, do not ask what he meant. The doors slid open on the 29th floor with a soft, hydrating whisper. He stepped out first, and I hesitated an instant before following. The hallway stretched in white and smoke gray, absorbing noise. Everything was quiet, expensive, and slightly colder than human. The kind of place where mistakes echoed. "Welcome to strategy," he said without looking back. "How do you know where I'm going?" I asked. He finally faced me, and there was something like curiosity in that not quite human gaze. I like to know where hunger lives. Before I could figure out whether to laugh, HR appeared in a flurry of beige and efficiency, rescuing me from the conversation and, possibly, from myself. "Nia Park?" the HR coordinator chirped. "Great. We'll get you set up. Your desk is this way." I shot one last look over my shoulder, but the man was already gone, absorbed by a door that needed no nameplate. The silence he left behind felt like a decision I hadn't made yet. Open office, floor-to-ceiling glass, the city spread like a circuit board below, workstations arranged in mathematical calm, plants that were all the same green, identical chairs that probably had names like Arrow or Cloud. Everything here was designed not to squeak. Even the air felt curated, filtered, chilled, lemon light. "Intern row," HR said with the kind of smile that came standard with a laminated handbook. "You're here." My desk was a pristine rectangle by the window. A monitor, a keyboard, a miniature succulent in a white pot that looked like it had never known dust. I placed my satchel down like I was introducing a scuffed guest to a very particular host. My reflection fainted politely in the screen. "Welcome aboard," said a voice to my left. I turned. Ethan Choi, same mouth I used to know, practiced into an easy half smile, the kind that never had to ask for a favor because the world gave him one in advance. He looked good. That was annoying. Crisp shirt, tie exactly slanted, a hint of cologne that smelled like a clean calendar. "Ethan," I said carefully. Inside, the elevator conversation replayed itself, mixing with the year-old memory of handwritten apologies I never sent. I straightened my shoulders. "Hi." He gestured at my desk with a lazy little flourish. "So you made it, I did. Hope you're not planning to." "Linger," he said, tone low and friendly, words edged. "It's intense up here. People burn out fast." HR drifted away with a wave, abandoning us on the polite battlefield. I picked up the mouse. "I didn't come here to linger." "Good." He tapped my desk as if blessing it. "If you need anything, ask. Just not me. Kidding." He wasn't kidding. As he walked off, I stared at the place where his fingers had touched my surface and then at my own hands. They were steady. Good sign. My heart, on the other hand, was on a treadmill, sprinting in place. I didn't come here for Ethan. I told myself that, again. I came to prove that I wasn't the kind of person who left quietly. I came because my grandmother had ironed my shirt last night without saying anything except, "If you want the door to open, you knock like you mean it." Emails populated my screen. A welcome packet, a calendar invite, a map of the shared drives that looked like it came with the dare. I lost myself in clicking and skimming, learning the way some people learn a language, awkwardly, out loud, praying no one overheard my accent. "Park," said a new voice, clipped, as if my name were a task to dispatch. A woman appeared at the end of intern row, sharp bob, sharp eyes, blouse the color of expensive wine. "Marissa Hahn. Senior consultant. You're on the Westridge prep with me. We meet at 10, yes," I said. "Nice to meet you." She gave me a cool, compact smile. "Don't worry about contribution today. Observe. Absorb." She glanced at my suit, paused half a heartbeat, and moved on, heels not making a sound. Of course they didn't. At 9:45, a calendar chime flared. I gathered my notebook and stood. The room responded to movement with a soft shift in temperature, as if the building liked to have opinions. On my way to the conference rooms, the city caught my eye through the glass, cranes, rectangles, the river slicing through steel. I could see my future in it if I wanted to squint. The conference room had more glass, a screen that woke itself with an expensive glow, and chairs that adjusted themselves around you, which was both kind and vaguely invasive. People trickled in, Ethan with a relaxed stride, Marissa with an armful of printouts, a couple of analysts who radiated polite caffeine. Then the door opened, and the air changed, the way it does when a storm looks at a field and decides it's time. He walked in like he owned the weather. Dark suit, dark hair. The man from the elevator. He didn't carry a folder or a laptop, he carried attention. Heads turned in a quiet, inevitable choreography. "Good morning," he said, voice smooth enough to pour. "Let's keep it brief." "Kairon," Marissa said with the smile that wanted to be an invitation. "We're ready." Kairon. The name dropped into my stomach like another stone. He glanced around the table, a scan that didn't feel like looking so much as tasting. When his gaze brushed mine, my throat went tight, like he'd pressed a thumb to a pulse I'd been pretending not to have. He took a seat at the head of the table. No notes, no slides. Status. Presentations happened. Words moved. I tried to practice invisibility, which had always been my most reliable survival skill. But at some point, Kairon asked a question, and the slide on screen was the one I'd annotated last night at 2 a.m., and Marissa's answer wandered half a step off the truth. "Actually," I heard myself say, before fear could reinstall itself, "the client's Q3 pain point isn't adoption, it's retention." The survey's open text showed more dissatisfaction post-onboarding. Silence. The conference room smiled with its teeth. Marissa's head turned a fraction, slow. Ethan's eyebrow arched, friendly, dangerous. My body was a chorus of inconvenient sensations, heat, a prickle along my arms, the high-wire yawn of adrenaline. Kairon looked at me fully, and something cool and electric slid along my skin, like a breeze through a door I hadn't realized was open. "Source?" he asked. "Employee exit interviews," I said, and my voice held. Miracle. "Page 6 has the quotes." He waited 3 seconds, and in those seconds I felt weighed and measured, not just my answer but my spine. Then he nodded once, decisive. "Correct. Adjust the deck." Marissa's smile sharpened. "Of course." I exhaled carefully. I didn't look at Ethan, which felt like an accomplishment worthy of cake. The rest of the meeting moved like a train through a tunnel, loud, fast, inevitable. When it ended, chairs exhaled people into the hallway. I stayed behind to collect a dropped pen that wasn't mine because pretending to be busy is a habit that doesn't retire. "Ms. Park," Kairon said, as if my name didn't need to be asked for. I straightened so fast my vertebrae filed a complaint. "Yes?" He studied me in a way that felt clinical and not. "You don't taste like someone who wants revenge," he said, as if discussing the weather. "You taste like someone who wants to stop apologizing." I blinked, because that wasn't a thing people said unless they were fortune tellers or indecently perceptive. Do you always talk like that?" Only when it is accurate. He paused. Don't let Mr. Choi hand you his chores. If he does, hand them back. My mouth opened, closed, noted. His mouth did that half smile again, like he just sampled something pleasing. Good. He was already walking away when he added, without turning, HR will tell you I'm demanding. They're right. I stood there, surrounded by glass and chilled air and the faint scent of ozone he left behind, and tried to remember how to operate my legs. When I finally returned to intern row, Ethan was at my desk, leaning in a way that suggested ownership. You're bold today, he said lightly. Bold adjacent, I said. He laughed, then touched the edge of my monitor, the way some people touch a pet to remind it who's in charge. Don't get too comfortable, Nia. Strategy chews people. I chew back, I said, surprising both of us. He blinked. We'll see. When he left, I sank into my chair and stared out at the city's organized glitter. The office hummed around me, quiet conversations, keyboards like rain. The building's glass suggested transparency, but the cold in the air reminded me that clarity could cut. I flexed my hand, my pulse steadied. I wasn't here to be anyone's soft landing or convenient shadow. Not Ethan's, not Marissa's, not the man with midnight eyes who said I tasted like regret. I pressed my palm flat on the desk, feeling the cool under my skin. I didn't come here to leave, I whispered, just for me. No one was going to make me go. Especially him, Ethan. By 10 the next morning, I'd learned 3 things. The office coffee was strong enough to descale a kettle, the printers required a blood oath to cooperate, and Marissa Hahn smiled the way a scalpel gleams. Pretty, sharp, and fundamentally not for you. She appeared at the end of intern row, like a magazine ad for competence, silk blouse the color of Cabernet, tailored slacks, a pair of heels that whispered across carpet. She carried a tablet, a sheaf of annotated printouts, and an aura that said she'd left sleep behind years ago to pursue results. Park, she said, making my last name sound efficient. Walk. I walked. We moved through the working pods, glass dividers, murmuring analysts, the quiet thrum of a place that worshipped data. Marissa's perfume was citrus and something metal. It almost covered the coffee smell. You'll shadow me on Westridge, she said. Observe today, minor contribution tomorrow. Learn the tone of our deliverables, not just the content. Yes, I said. Thank you. She didn't look at me, which was almost a kindness. I'm aware of your history with Mr. Choi. It's irrelevant as long as your output is clean. My face attempted not to move. Understood. We stopped at a pod where 2 analysts sat, eyes raccoon bright with spreadsheet light. One looked up, gave me a sympathetic half-smile that belonged to someone who had survived a fire drill without shoes. Don't worry, he whispered as Marissa scrolled through something devastating. Everyone cries in the bathroom at least once. It's like onboarding, I smiled back, grateful for the humor, even if my stomach did a roller coaster drop at the reminder. Ethan. Bathroom. No crying, we had discussed this. Marissa set a pace that assumed gravity would keep up. By the time we reached the office kitchen, my calves had opinions. The kitchen was a glass box with a long, pale counter. 2 coffee machines the size of scooters, a row of mugs that all said things like optimize and synergy like motivational threats. Fuel, Marissa said, plucking a mug that read deliver and filling it with something black enough to absorb light. She sipped, considered, and grimaced a fraction. Partner coffee is worse. Consider yourself fortunate. I reached for the other machine, which seemed kinder. As I fumbled with buttons, a woman in a chunky cardigan leaned in. Careful, she murmured out of the side of her mouth. Don't pick a mug that says family, unless you want to be asked about team building. Thanks, I whispered. She extended a hand. Jules. Research. If you need a charger, ask me. If you need to cry, don't do it by the windows. The glare is unforgiving. I don't plan on... Sure, she said, eyes warm. None of us did. Behind us, someone added milk to their cup with the precise air of lining up a shot. New intern? Another voice asked, male, amused. New intern, Jules confirmed. The brave kind, assigned to Marissa on day 2. She gave me a conspiratorial look. And a word of caution, don't catch Kairon Vale's eye. He's brilliant and How do I put this kindly? Demanding in a way that starves oxygen. Starves oxygen? I repeated. He makes the room remember how to behave, the male voice said, stepping into view. He wore the ever-safe consultant uniform and a grin that telegraphed gossip. We've seen people shine under him. We've also seen people combust. Keep your head down, learn the verb tenses he prefers, you'll be fine. Verb tenses? Past perfect, Jules said. He lives there. Marissa cleared her throat, and the kitchen practiced immediate silence. Park, she said, already moving. Bring your coffee. We made it back to her glass-edged workstation, where she divided her attention into ruthless equal parts across 3 screens. Here, she said, sliding me a thin stack of onboarding for the Westridge deck. Note the voice. We're not selling hope. We're selling evidence that we saw the problem before the client did. I flipped through it, pen ready. Got it. And Park, she added, eyes still on her screen. Mr. Choi will attempt to delegate his deadline fatigue. If he tries, return the fatigue to its original owner. The timing would have been funny if it weren't so precise. Ethan arrived like a calendar reminder you couldn't snooze, carrying a folder. Nia, he said, casual, like we were at a backyard barbecue. You're on the 2019 retention analysis refresh, right? Great, there's a data pull we forgot and... I didn't assign her to that, Marissa said without looking up. It's good practice, Ethan said smoothly, and she's fast. Marissa's smile was a faint crescent in glass. Ah, practice. Park? I'm full on Westridge, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral and my knees non-liquid. But if you send me the specs, I can time box it for later. Ethan's expression flickered. He wasn't used to me having boundaries that sounded like calendar blocks. It's due by end of day. Then it should stay with the person who owns the end of day, Marissa murmured, and clicked something in a way that sounded like a verdict. Ethan's jaw set for a half-second before he switched back to friendly. Of course, he said. We'll sync later, Nia. After he left, Marissa glanced at me, just once. Good. You can be pliable without being bendable. I've never been compared to a yoga mat before, I said. Her mouth made a shape that, on a more forgiving face, would have been a laugh. Don't get sentimental. 10 o'clock, my desk. We'll go to Mr. Vale's office. Mr. Vale, Kairon. The elevator man with the midnight water eyes. The oxygen thief. Great. His office wasn't big, it was deliberate. Glass walls like everyone else, but the glass felt thicker, like it had learned to be a wall instead of a window. Minimal furniture. A single plant doing better than any of mine ever had. A view that didn't erase the city so much as edit it. Marissa knocked once and entered as if doors were ceremonial. I followed, clutching my notebook like a shield. Kairon looked up from a screen that showed nothing I could comprehend and everything he already did. Status, he said. Marissa was halfway through a concise update when he lifted a hand, and silence obeyed. Miss Park, he said, turning to me as if he'd always meant to. How are you finding our flavors? I blinked. Flavors? He gestured toward the mug in my hand. We try to keep the beans humane. Oh, I looked at the coffee I had forgotten I was holding. It's fine. May I? He asked. I hesitated, then handed it over. He raised the cup as if to smell it, paused. His eyes found mine with the kind of attention that made the rest of the room less important. Then he took a sip. He considered. Too bitter, he said, and set it down with a soft click. But then, bitterness is often a mask for something else. Like cheap beans? I offered. Like fear, he said, unbothered. Regret is sweeter. Marissa's posture registered micro-annoyance. We have the deck 70% polished. We'll adjust for the retention emphasis Miss Park identified yesterday. He nodded. Good. Miss Park, why did you choose this industry? The question was a straight line that felt like a trap. I tried the truth. Because I'm good at taking puzzles apart and putting them back in a way that makes more sense. Who told you that? My grandmother, I said, then regretted it, because personal disclosures were like opening windows, nice in a breeze, disastrous in a storm. Do you often believe women who have already survived more than you? He asked, not unkindly. I try to, I said. They have better data. Something flickered in his expression. Approval, amusement. Something that could be either until it decided. And why here? Because my ex works here and I wanted to be taller than his shadow. Because I wanted to see if I could breathe at this altitude, I said instead. Can you? Ask me after lunch, I said before I could stop myself. Marissa coughed into her fist in a way that translated to oh no, but Kairon's mouth did the half-smile. Fair. He leaned back, a fraction. I don't recommend proximity to me, Miss Park. It tends to complicate trajectories. Duly noted, I said, and meant it in 3 contradictory ways. We ran through specifics. Marissa led with a surgeon's rhythm, I supplemented when asked. Sometimes Kairon's questions were standard, and sometimes they weren't questions at all. They were tuning forks he struck and held near you to hear what you vibrated with. More than once I had the disconcerting sense that he wasn't just listening to what I said, he was listening to what I almost did. When we wrapped, he slid my mug back toward me. A ring of coffee had printed itself on his desk like a small eclipse. He didn't seem annoyed. Bring a different blend next time, he said. Your hands shake less when the bitterness isn't doing all the work. Outside, in the corridor's conditioned air, Marissa fixed me with that crescent smile again. He likes you. I don't think that's the verb, I said, heartbeat doing an oddly specific tap dance. I think he catalogs me, then be worth cataloging, she said, already walking. Back at intern row, Ethan was waiting with a casual lean and a document open on my screen. Great news, he said, as if reading from a script titled Reasonable Requests. I started a draft for you to clean up. You have a lighter load than the others, it's good practice. I looked at the document. It wasn't a draft. It was a mess wearing a draft's clothing. Marissa has me blocked on Westridge until 2, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I can help after if time permits. It doesn't, he said, smile thin, but I knew you'd pull through. I took a breath that touched my ribs. Then you'll pull through. Since you own it. He blinked, the pleasant mask wobbling. I thought we were a team. We are, I said. That's why I'm doing the work assigned to me so you can focus on the work assigned to you. He held my gaze a beat too long, then laughed. You've gotten spunky, pliable, not bendable, I said before I could stop myself. Ethan was still smiling when he stepped away, but the smile had picked up static. The afternoon passed in deliverable-shaped chunks. I learned how the sun moved across our glass, how the temperature dropped when the AC decided feelings were weaknesses, how the building applied pressure, like a hand on the back of your neck. Not enough to hurt, just enough to remind. Every so often, when I looked up, I caught a reflection, dark suit, still posture, in the glass of a nearby conference room. Not close, not lingering, but there. Watching the floor, or the horizon, or me. By 5, I decided 2 things. The coffee was, in fact, too bitter, and Kairon Vale had a knack for being exactly where I might prove what I would do next. The conference room looked extra honest today. Glass on 3 sides, a table polished to the point of self-awareness, chairs that adjusted around you like they'd been trained. The clients arrived with perfect handshakes and the pleasant expectation that we would rescue them from themselves by noon. Marissa took the head of the table and set her tablet down like a knife she didn't need to flash. Ethan slid into a seat opposite me with a grin that was all toothpaste. I cued the deck I'd finalized at 1:17 a.m., double-checked the title slide, clean, sober font, no typos, my heart doing an exercise routine, and breathed. Let's begin, Marissa said. Nia will walk us through the retention analysis. I stood, clicked, and watched the opening slide bloom on the screen. Except it didn't. What appeared was an older template, gradients, clip art arrows, and a chart that belonged in a museum of poor decisions. A laugh hiccuped out of my throat before I could strangle it. Not audible, I hoped. Slide, Marissa prompted, silk over steel. Of course, I said and clicked again. The second slide was worse. Numbers that didn't match the client's last quarter, labels that had been renamed 3 months ago. I felt the floor shift, not physically, but in the way reality does when you step forward expecting ground and find an opinion instead. This isn't the deck. My file name was correct, Westridge.retention, but the content was not. It was V with a bad haircut. Across the table, Ethan lounged into the moment like it was a hammock. Looks comprehensive, he offered. I could taste copper. This is an earlier iteration, I said, keeping my voice level with effort. We'll jump to the updated retention drivers in... Click. The updated drivers were not updated. They were a mess wearing my name tag. A hot blush climbed my throat, the kind that tells old memories it's time to come out and dance. I heard the whisper rustle of people shifting in their seats. From the door glass, the office watched, impassive. "Miss Park," one of the clients said, "kind enough to be dangerous. These churn categories don't align with the exit interviews you cited in your pre-read." "They don't," I said, and my smile felt stapled on. "Because this is an older..." "Let's not waste our guest's time," Marissa cut in, voice pleasant, smile curving. "If you didn't know her, you might think it was sympathy. If you did, you recognized restraint. We'll circle back to the correct figures." I looked down at my laptop and, for the first time, noticed the file path in tiny letters, shared decks drafts. Not my locked folder. The cursor blinked. My heart did too, painfully. Ethan leaned toward his mic. "No worries," he soothed, to the clients, to the room, to his reflection. "Happens. Early-stage contributors sometimes miss the..." "Ethan," Marissa said without looking at him. I raised my head, dutiful, because if you're going to drown, you should at least look at the sky. "If we jump to the customer life cycle slide," I said, "the pattern is clear regardless of labels. Satisfaction decays post-onboarding because the value story goes silent. Calls drop off. Feature adoption stalls. People don't leave because the product is bad, they leave because the conversation stops. Silence. The kind that measures you." "Source?" the same client asked. "Exit interviews and support ticket tags," I said. "If you search the open text for forgot, stopped, or didn't know, you'll see the clustering." Something flickered at the edge of my vision, movement in the glass beyond the door. A dark suit, still posture. He didn't enter, he didn't need to. "Fine," Marissa said smoothly. "We'll pull those tags forward." She nodded at me. "Continue." "High level." I did, hopping like a stone over a river, skipping the slides that would betray me, landing on ones that could still bear weight. It wasn't graceful, but it was motion. The clients asked questions in the gentle voice used for children and lawyers. I answered with facts and the steady rage of someone who had done the work and was watching the wrong work wear its clothes. Ethan smiled, chimed in, practiced we as if he hadn't just moved a deck he had no business touching. My body cataloged everything. The heat in my face, the cold in my fingers, the embarrassing way your heart wants to sprint when there's nowhere to go. Midway through, the door opened on a whisper and the room remembered how to hold its spine. "Mr. Vale," Marissa said. Kairon inclined his head, not apologizing for the interruption. He took an empty chair near the corner and folded into it like a decision. His gaze moved once across the table. When it reached me, the panic that had been gnawing my ribs paused, like even fear had social manners around him. "Proceed," he said. I did. For 3 more slides, and then the deck punished me with a graph that lied. The numbers were inverted. The axis labels wobbled. Somewhere a statistician cried. "Let's set aside the historic breakdown," Kairon said, voice soft as lamplight. "What are the 3 things Westridge can do next month that will cost the least and change the most?" The room pivoted with him, grateful for gravity. I answered before my brain could veto my mouth. Automate the post-onboarding did you know sequence using usage triggers. Assign a real human to check on accounts that fall under 20% feature adoption by week 3. And add a banner in-app that explains feature value in customer language, not internal nouns. One of the clients sat forward. "How do we decide those human touch points?" "Borrow support's gut," I said. "They know who's silent before silence becomes cancellation." Marissa nodded, approving and annoyed, an expression she wore like jewelry. Ethan glanced at the wall clock, calculating how fast the fire was spreading and where the exits were. "Good," Kairon said. "Let's talk pilots." He moved the conversation like you'd move a piece on a board you already owned. Questions. Trade-offs. A joke dry enough to pass compliance. By the time we wrapped, the clients were nodding the nod of people who felt guided and thus grateful. In the soft chaos of standing handshakes and exchanged calendars, I shut my laptop with careful hands. The wrong file glowed in my mind like a small, stupid sun. I couldn't prove it, not yet, but I could feel Ethan's fingerprints, smoothed, practiced, everywhere. "Miss Park," Kairon said, and the room emptied itself of everyone who wasn't supposed to hear what came next. "Walk with me." We stepped into the corridor. Carpet that swallowed steps. Glass that showed you yourself and called it transparency. He didn't speak until we'd passed a cluster of plants performing photosynthesis like it was their job. "You're angry," he observed, which was an outrageous understatement. "I'm fine," I lied, which was a polite one. He glanced down at my hands. I hadn't realized I was still clutching the laptop like a flotation device. "Regret," he said, "is less bitter when it burns." I blinked up at him. "I'm sorry? When you turn it into anger," he said, as if discussing weather patterns, "it loses the aftertaste that lingers at the back of the tongue." He arched a brow. "It becomes useful, so I should be furious for nutritional reasons?" "For strategic ones," he said. We stopped at the end of the corridor, where the city pressed its face against the glass. He turned, the light carving an edge along his cheek. "Someone sabotaged you." The word landed like a gavel. I swallowed. Do you know?" "I don't need to know. I only need to see outcomes," he said. "And to see what you do with them." I exhaled. It came out like a laugh that had forgotten how. "I was ready to leave at lunch," I admitted, "for about 11 seconds. His mouth tilted. 11 seconds is generous." "I like a dramatic exit," I said, "but I prefer a better sequel." He watched me the way a tuning fork listens. "Do not allow Mr. Choi to make you small," he said, and there was no poetry in it this time, only instruction. "And don't beg Miss Han for rescue. She respects outcomes, not injuries." I wasn't going to beg. "Good," he said, and reached out, not with the familiarity that assumes, but with the precision that asks. His fingers touched my wrist, just at the inside where the pulse lives. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even long. It was a cool press, a measured weight. But something in me uncoiled, small and stubborn as a spring coming back to shape. The air sharpened, colors found edges. The humiliation didn't vanish. He wasn't a magician, but it rearranged itself into something I could stand on instead of drown in. I pulled in a breath that went all the way down. My heartbeat, which had been sprinting like it was late for a flight, slowed to a jog. I looked up at him, startled. He withdrew his hand. "Useful," he said simply. "Don't ask for definitions you don't need," he said. "Use the moment, fix the deck, send it to the clients by 5, with an apology that admits error and demonstrates control." He paused. "Do not explain who did it. That's for me, I can handle." "I know," he said, and there was a warmth in it, brief and almost invisible, like sunlight deciding to acknowledge winter. We walked back. He didn't touch me again. He didn't need to. The building felt the same, cold, curated, still smug, but my feet found the floor differently. At my desk, Jules rolled by with a chair and a chocolate she pretended to drop. I caught it on instinct. "You good?" she asked without asking. "Getting there," I said, and meant it more than I expected. Ethan was nowhere visible, which meant he was somewhere useful. To himself. Marissa passed, scanning, and gave me a look that said "deliver and don't die" in the same syllable. I opened the correct file, version 7 with the right spine, and worked. The day narrowed to a point. Words aligned, numbers apologized. Charts chose honesty. At 4:52, I sent the corrected deck with a clean subject line and an email body built like a bridge. Only after the whoosh did I lean back and let my eyes close for 3 seconds. I waited for the old familiar heaviness to take the seat beside me, drape its arm around my shoulders, and whisper about failure. It didn't show. Instead, there was a space where the heaviness had been, not empty, available. I opened my eyes to the reflection in the glass. My face, the city, the suggestion of a man in a dark suit paused by the far conference room. Gaze angled not at the horizon but at intern row. For the first time since orientation, breathing didn't feel like an assignment. The next week arrived with the brisk efficiency of an email received at 6:59 a.m. I answered it at 7:02 and, for once, felt early instead of late. The corrected Westridge deck had landed well. A client reply even used the words "thoughtful salvage," which sounded like a compliment in a tuxedo. Small wins began to stack like discrete coins. When Ethan slid an urgent quick fix into my inbox, subject line "Help," I replied with "Happy to assist after Westridge review. Unless this is yours to own by end of day. It was amazing how professional language could act like a fence. He hit me with 3 ellipses and a thumbs up, which translated to fine, and the task evaporated like a spilled latte on the sidewalk. When the analysts asked if I'd take notes in a meeting and maybe present the notes since you wrote them, I smiled and said, I'll take notes if someone else presents, and I'll present if someone else takes notes. The room did the math. For once, it didn't add up to me. Jules rolled by my desk at noon with 2 granola bars and a look. You have the posture of victory, she murmured. It's subtle and terrifying. It's the posture of not being a free buffet, I said. Same difference, she said, and left me a sticky note that read, You're doing great. Hydrate. Marissa, on the other hand, tightened. Her compliments were as rare as solar eclipses and as brief. Good catch, she said once, when I flagged a buried risk in a model. Then, half a heartbeat later, don't get highlighted. The pause after get carried the weight of an eyebrow. Highlighted, as in noticed, as in Kairon. She didn't say his name. She didn't need to. When he passed intern row, air behaved, heads turned by instinct. He rarely stopped, but when he did, the world practiced a more precise grammar. He didn't stop at my desk. He didn't need to. By Wednesday, I had a rhythm. I drafted, reviewed, pushed back, accepted, pushed back, and learned the difference between being exact and being precious. When an analyst DM'd me we should hang later, Marissa's a dragon, I replied dragons are efficient heat sources and kept working. The thrill of competence was better than any apology I could have wrung out of last year. Around 3, a ping, Miss Park. 5 minutes, lobby. The sender field didn't show a name. It didn't have to. I told myself it was ridiculous to check my reflection in the monitor. I checked anyway. The suit still tried its best. I smoothed a phantom wrinkle and took the elevator down, watching my pulse settle in the chrome. He was waiting near the revolving doors, looking like an advertisement for restraint. The lobby's eucalyptus and money smell suited him too well. Walk, he said. Is this a performance review? I asked. A coffee, he said. Unless you prefer performance reviews to come with a muffin. That depends on the muffin, I said, falling in step. And the performance? He had a slight smile that might have been private. Outside the city did its staggered exhale. We crossed to the small cafe wedged between a dry cleaner and a florist. The sign was hand-painted, the bell over the door was earnest, the place smelled like butter and intentions. The barista brightened when she saw him. The usual? 2, he said, then looked at me. Unless you prefer bitterness. Not today, I said. I'm trying to give my stomach a chance at happiness. We found a small table near the window. The cafe was all warm wood and plants that clearly had someone sing to them. I wrapped my hands around the cup the moment it arrived, grateful for the uncomplicated heat. Kairon lifted his own and inhaled like a person appreciating a Bordeaux. Better, he said. You shake less when life isn't doing all the seasoning. You make coffee sound like a moral test. It is, he said, deadpan. Then lighter, your week has had a different flavor, less humiliation, more salt. Salt is useful, he said. It makes everything honest. I laughed into my cup. Well, honesty update. I told Ethan no today without hyperventilating. Good. He considered me the way a mathematician considers a result. Pleased without being surprised. Boundaries improve the palate. You talk like a sommelier who moonlights as a therapist, I said. Only when the patient is edible, he returned. So casual, I sputtered a little, then pretended I hadn't. He watched the street for a moment, people in small marching stories. You're learning quickly, he said. It's vexing. Vexing. I prefer not to admire interns, he said, as if reporting a weather front. It complicates trajectories. Right, I said. And your oxygen policy, the air is fine if people remember to use it, he said, and set his cup down, fingers precise. But you, he paused, searching, which was rare enough to make the room lean closer. You've adjusted the dilution. I have to take smaller sips. I stared. That is either a compliment or a complaint. It's both, he said. Most regret burns, yours. He flexed his fingers like tasting a memory. It has shifted. It is sweeter. More tensile. It doesn't collapse under heat. You're saying my self-loathing has improved mouthfeel? I said, because sarcasm is a flotation device. Your self-regard has improved structure, he said, tone soft, precise. It holds... Something in my chest tilted. The cafe's light draped itself over his face, warming the edges, making him look less like a storm and more like the hour before one. It would have been easy to mistake the feeling for attraction. It was attraction. It was also relief. Marissa thinks I'm getting highlighted, I said. She didn't say by whom. Miss Han recognizes pressure as a competitive advantage, he said. She dislikes when it isn't hers. She also dislikes my suit. She dislikes everything she can't control, he said, without malice. It keeps her effective. You sound fond, I said. I am fond of outcome, he said, and people who deliver it, and of interns who taste interesting. He looked at me then, full and unhurried. The cafe noise thinned around us, or maybe I imagined that part. I prefer not to admit it, he said. But yes, you have spoiled me. My brain misfired. Spoiled you? It is inconvenient, he said, to want to be near a particular flavor. I'm not a dessert, I said, struggling for a joke. His mouth tipped. You are a dessert one cannot eat slowly. I dropped my gaze into the caramel foam to avoid drowning in implication. That's a terrible line, I said, because it was safer than say that again. It is accurate, he said. We sat with that, the air warming and cooling around the words. Outside, a courier nearly collided with a woman carrying lilies. They both performed a small ballet to avoid disaster, and then laughed like they'd earned the moment. I sipped. The coffee was undeniably good, round, kind. Why me? I asked finally. You have a whole building's worth of flavors. I don't choose hunger, he said, not unkindly. It chooses me. And I try not to interfere with the ecosystem. People need their regrets, until they don't. And you? I need restraint, he said. Until I don't. We both pretended to be very interested in our cups. Is that hard? I asked, softer. The restraint? His gaze moved back to me, steady enough that my skin paid attention. Increasingly, he said, You have made distance inconvenient. He said it like a fact, not a confession, which made it worse. Or better, I couldn't decide. I'm not good at whatever this is, I admitted. I came here to be good at slides. You're getting good at both, he said. Slides and being, he said, saving me from myself. We left a few minutes later with a shared silence that behaved itself. Back in the lobby, he paused by the column of black stone that looked like it had been airlifted from a mountain and told to behave. Miss Park, he said, turning to me like he was deciding whether to let the sun in. I won't protect you from Miss Han's competitiveness. Or from Mr. Choi's revisions. I didn't ask you to, I said. Good, he replied. If I did, you might taste different. We stepped into the elevator. The mirrored walls reflected us twice over. Two people pretending to analyze the panel of numbers like it mattered more than the math in the middle of the car. On 29, the doors sighed open. He didn't move. I did, because I was an intern with deliverables, and that's what interns do. I stepped out, then turned when the air told me he was still there. His gaze was waiting, unreadable, level, unflinching. For a beat, it had edges that were all hunt. For the next beat, it softened, like he'd remembered something gentler and chosen it. Thank you for the coffee, I said, because words needed a place to land. He inclined his head a fraction. Try the house blend tomorrow, less bitter. He let the doors close between us. The glass in the office still reflected order and ambition, the air still bit just enough to keep you awake. But my hands didn't shake when I set them on the keyboard. The cursor waited, patient as a pulse. I started typing, and for a long while the only thing that mattered was the work and the peculiar warmth of being seen by a man I couldn't decide was a storm or shelter. The last thing I saw when I finally looked up was his reflection in a far pane of glass, watching or simply there, a question with good posture, and my own face, steadier than yesterday, holding. The presentation room smelled like fresh paint and expensive projection bulbs. A wall-sized screen glowed with the title slide of the quarterly review, and rows of chairs faced it in obedient anticipation. The partners were already in the front row, flanked by two clients who carried the air of people who expected to be impressed on schedule. Marissa stood at the podium, rehearsed and serene. I was 2 seats back, my deck queued on the shared drive, fingers running over the clicker in my pocket like a worry stone. This was my slot, 15 minutes to show that the retention fixes we'd piloted could scale. Numbers solid, visuals clean. I'd triple-checked the file. When my name was called, I rose, smoothed my jacket, and crossed to the podium. My deck bloomed on screen, or something that wore its skin. The graphs were wrong. Axes flipped, bars shortened, the Q2 numbers bleeding into Q3 like a slow disaster. The heat hit my face first, then my chest. It seems where my voice caught, then smoothed itself by force. Looking at a draft version, I'll pull the finalized. Go ahead and walk us through what's here, one partner said, not unkindly, but with the faint impatience of someone watching their calendar slip. We can circle back. I clicked. Each slide hurt more than the last. Percentages inflated where they should have dipped, retention trends inverted, my carefully modeled story turned inside out. In the front row, Marissa's expression was the picture of calm absorption. If you didn't know her, you'd think she was focused on my delivery. If you did, you'd see the faint, satisfied gleam behind her eyes. In the back of the room, leaning against the wall, Kairon watched. He didn't move, didn't speak, but his gaze followed every stutter in my breath, every fraction of a second I took to translate sabotage into sentences. I fought my way through, rewording as I went, anchoring each wrong chart with the correct interpretation from memory. By the last slide, my mouth was dry, but my spine was still vertical. Questions came, surgical and fast. I answered without notes, because notes would have betrayed me. One client frowned at the inconsistency between the visuals and my explanations. I admitted the mismatch, attributed it to a file error, and promised corrected materials within the hour. The applause at the end was polite, perfunctory. As I stepped away from the podium, I could feel my pulse in my teeth. The room emptied slowly, partners lingering with the clients, analysts rolling up cables, Marissa offering her polished smile to anyone who met her eye. I was almost to the door when Kairon's voice cut across the low hum. Miss Park. With me, it wasn't loud, it didn't have to be. My feet obeyed before my head decided. We walked in silence down the corridor to his office. The glass walls seemed thicker today, the air inside cooler. He closed the door behind me, the soft click sounding too much like a seal. Sit, he said. I did. He didn't take his chair. Instead, he stood by the window looking out at the city like it had asked for his opinion. That deck was altered. I let out a sharp laugh that didn't belong to amusement. You think? I know. He turned to face me. You did not make those errors, which is why you were still standing at the end. I gripped the edge of the chair. Can you tell them? The partners? His head tilted, not without making it messier. There is no proof that would satisfy the politics of the moment. And proofless accusations serve no one but the saboteur. Great, I said, the word tasting like chalk. So I just get to sit with this. No, he said, crossing the room in 2 measured steps. You get to stand with it. For now, the distinction was lost on the part of me still vibrating with humiliation. And how exactly am I supposed to do that when my stomach's trying to turn inside out? Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of decision. I can help with that. I almost laughed again. Unless you've got a time machine. He stopped in front of me. Not a time machine. A recalibration. That sounds suspiciously like HR training. It's not. Before I could form another question, he reached down, fingers brushing the inside of my wrist. The contact was light, deliberate. A pulse met a pulse, and then, quiet, not in the room but inside me. The churn of embarrassment, the looping replay of every wrong slide, the acid heat in my throat, all of it dimmed, as if someone had turned down the gain on a feedback loop. My breathing evened out without permission. The hum in my skull eased into something like still water. I looked up at him. What did you... Removed the weight, he said, as if discussing the weather. Temporarily. The calm was uncanny, but it wasn't numbness. I could still think, I just wasn't drowning in it. How temporary? I asked. A night, he said. Long enough for you to act without the drag of replaying your failure. Short enough that it doesn't change you, change me? My voice felt steadier than it should have. You make it sound dangerous. It is, he said, still holding my wrist. His gaze locked on mine, unblinking. Regret shapes people, take it away too soon, and they lose the part of themselves that learns not to step in the same fire twice. And you don't mind stepping in for the evening? His mouth curved faintly. You've earned a reprieve. Something warm moved under my skin at the words, a slow realization that this, whatever this was not in any handbook. Why me? I asked, softly. Because you fought for the truth of the data even as the picture lied, he said. Because you stayed upright. And because his thumb pressed just once against my pulse, I am curious. The space between us felt narrower than the actual distance. Curious, I echoed, and it didn't sound like a safe word. You alter the flavor, he said. When you are angry, it burns. When you are determined, it holds. Tonight, without regret, we'll see. I swallowed, and the sound seemed loud. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, it returns, he said, and you decide what to do with it. His hand lingered another heartbeat before he stepped back, letting the air between us breathe again. I almost missed the weight of his touch, which was its own kind of warning. So, I said, standing because sitting felt too small. What do I do with my regret-free night? Finish the corrected deck, he said, the practical tone almost jarring after what had just passed. Send it before you leave. Then sleep. That's it? For tonight, he said. Use the quiet while you have it. I met his eyes, searching for the usual sharp edge. It was there, but there was something else layered over it, something warmer that didn't belong in the predator's gaze. I nodded, moving toward the door. My hand was on the knob when he spoke again. Nia. I looked back. He was still by the window, the city lights sketching his profile in gold and shadow. Don't thank me, he said. You won't want to when you understand the cost. The words should have chilled me. Instead, they left a heat low in my chest that followed me out of the office, down the corridor, and back to my desk. The deck was rebuilt by 7. Numbers aligned, visuals told the truth, and the email to the partners was concise and calm. I attached the file, hit send, and sat back. The quiet inside me was still there, unnatural but undeniably useful. I should have gone home. Instead, I lingered, watching the office empty. When I finally shut down my computer, the reflection in the glass caught me. My face, composed in a way I didn't entirely recognize, and behind it, in the far pane, the silhouette of a man who didn't need to be this close to the intern row. Our eyes met across glass and distance. I couldn't read the look, hunter, protector, something in between, but it held me until the lights in the hall cut out, and I realized I was holding my breath. Tonight, at least, I didn't regret it. My apartment smelled like rain-soaked concrete and takeout. I dropped my bag by the door and kicked off my shoes, prepared to sink into the couch for a brief, hard truce with the day. Instead, Lily was already there, curled into the corner, blanket around her shoulders, scrolling through something on her phone. She looked up with that too bright grin that meant she had news. You're seeing someone. I froze mid-step. Hello to you too. Don't hello me, she said, sitting up. You've been different, standing taller, smiling like you know a secret. I know several, I said, heading toward the kitchen. Most involve how little food is actually in this fridge. She followed, ignoring my diversion. It's someone from work, isn't it? I kept my back to her, rummaging for water like hydration was an answer. Why are we having this conversation? Because you're my best friend, she said, and I can tell when you're in over your head. I turned, bottle in hand. And you've decided I'm in over my head because... She hesitated, then shrugged. I saw you, yesterday, talking to him. I didn't have to ask who him was. She wouldn't have used that tone for anyone else. Tall, dark, terrifying, she continued. The kind of man whose suits cost more than my rent. You were standing way too close for boss and intern. I opened my mouth, shut it, opened it again. It's complicated, her brow furrowed. Complicated is how people describe houseplants they've already killed. This isn't safe, Nia. It's not unsafe, I said too quickly. She crossed her arms. You think the HR department is going to call it complicated? You're on an internship. He's your boss. I wanted to tell her she didn't understand, that this wasn't a normal office flirtation or some cliché about power dynamics. But how could I explain Kairon in a way that didn't sound like I'd lost my mind? He's not like other bosses, was something you said before ending up in a very bad memoir. Lily, I began. I'm not judging you, she interrupted. I'm trying to protect you. You've worked so hard to get your confidence back, and if this goes wrong, it's not going to. I just don't want you to be the casualty, she said, softer now. Promise me you'll at least... Be careful, I didn't promise. I just let the silence stand between us, fragile as spun glass. The call from HR came the next afternoon. Miss Park, could you step into conference room B? Conference room B was HR's neutral zone. Small table, polite chairs, a view of a brick wall to remind you there was no easy way out. Two people sat waiting, Sandra from HR, her smile like a cup of herbal tea you didn't ask for, and a junior compliance officer with a laptop open, fingers poised. Please, have a seat, Sandra said. We just want to have a quick chat. That phrase had the same energy as we need to talk. I sat, my palms suddenly damp. We've received information, she began, that you may be engaging in a personal relationship with your direct supervisor. The words landed like a bucket of cold water down my spine. Information from whom? Sandra gave the patient head tilt of someone who wasn't going to answer. If this is the case, we need to discuss any potential conflicts of interest. It's not, I started, then stopped because the truth was. Not exactly, no. My work is my work. I've met with him professionally, in and out of the office. In and out? The compliance officer's fingers didn't stop moving. I wanted to throw the table at them, but instead I said, coffee meetings. Client prep. Debriefs. Sandra's smile didn't budge. I'm sure you understand we have to ensure fairness and prevent the appearance of favoritism. There it was. Appearance. No mention of sabotage. Of the times Kairon had saved my credibility in ways no one else could see. Just the idea that being in his orbit meant I couldn't have earned anything. You're not in trouble, she added, which was a lie. This conversation was the trouble. When they finally dismissed me, I walked out into the corridor with my ears ringing. My feet carried me toward intern row out of habit, but I stopped short. Kairon was at the far end, in conversation with Marissa. His stance was casual, hands in pockets, eyes on her as if she were the only person in the building worth hearing. He didn't look my way, not once. A stupid, treacherous part of me had expected, what? That he'd intervene, that he'd pull me into his office, close the door, and make it all irrelevant? Instead, he was the picture of professional distance, the air between us stripped of any private warmth. I moved to my desk, head down, and opened my laptop. Jules slid a note onto my keyboard. HR, you okay? I wrote back, fine. It was easier than explaining how it felt to be under a microscope, all the private moments reduced to something tawdry in someone else's retelling. An hour later, I saw Lily's name light up my phone. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not when I knew with a certainty that tasted like iron that she was the one who'd gone to HR. She would have told herself it was for my own good. She would have believed it. The rest of the day passed in a blur of spreadsheets and deliberate avoidance. When I left, the lobby's glass caught my reflection alongside his. Kairon was stepping into the elevator with two partners, his expression neutral, his voice low. Our eyes didn't meet. I told myself it was strategy, keeping his distance so no one could claim favoritism. I told myself it was smart, but as I walked out into the evening air, those explanations didn't quiet the hollow space in my chest. For the first time, I wondered if I'd been wrong about him. If all the careful touches, the moments of rescue, the words that seemed meant only for me, if they'd all been part of a predator's patience. The night pressed cool against my face. Somewhere behind me, the building's lights glowed, steady and impersonal. Maybe that was all he was, a man who knew how to make you feel seen, just long enough to enjoy the taste. The email arrived at 4:13 p.m. with the subject line that makes your stomach pre-flinch regarding internship status. It was 4 paragraphs of corporate etiquette laminated in concern. Due to recent process concerns and a desire to maintain equitable standards, my internship would be ending at the close of week. With sincere appreciation for your contributions. I read it twice, because the first time my eyes rebelled. The second time my hands did. Jules slid into the chair beside me without ceremony and placed her phone face down on my desk, like contraband. You didn't get this from me. On the screen, a screenshot of a Slack thread I wasn't supposed to see. Ethan in a private channel with HR and a partner's chief of staff, gently flagging appearance issues around my proximity to Mr. Vale, attaching timestamps for meetings I hadn't logged on the public calendar. The tone was a masterpiece of concern, helpful, protective, unctuous. A second screenshot. A note from Marissa to HR, recommend rotating her out to minimize risk optics. Talent promising, timing unfortunate. I could almost hear the mild sigh. The room swam and then settled. How did you... Don't ask, Jules said. Do you want to breathe or rage? I have snacks for either. I want to work, I said, because the alternative was to scream. And then I want to go upstairs. Upstairs is a choice, she said carefully. It's the only one I have left, I said, and closed my laptop before my self-control leaked out through the keyboard. His office felt like a new weather system had moved in. The glass was still glass, the plant still impossibly alive, the city still arranging its geometry beyond the window. But the air had the taste of a pre-storm, ion and patience. He didn't look surprised to see me. He rarely did. Ms. Park HR sent the email, I said. No preamble because the point had already arrived. End of week. He gestured to the chair. I didn't sit. Sitting felt like surrender. He adjusted, leaning a hip against the edge of his desk, the motion precise as punctuation. I know, he said. The words landed like a door closing softly. Did you... I started, then stopped. Can you fix it? No, he said, and the honesty was so clean it hurt, not without making it worse for you. Or for others I have to protect. The others being the optics, I said, bitterness bracing my voice like a brace around a broken thing. He didn't flinch. The others being the people whose outcomes depend on me not setting fire to the policy scaffolding in public. I laughed once, short enough to cut my tongue. Good to know I'm a scaffolding risk. You are a person I won't gamble with, he said. By letting me go, he watched me the way a blade watches a whetstone. By not pinning you to a narrative that keeps you small. There it was, the poetry I had once mistaken for safety. Don't do that, I said. Don't make this sound like mercy. It isn't mercy, he said. It's a choice, mine. And, soon, yours. Something in me wanted to step forward and knock everything off his desk, see if the careful man came undone. I held my ground. Ethan fed HR, I said. With help, yes, and you're letting him... I'm not letting him anything, he said, and for a heartbeat the calm cracked, a line of heat through ice. I'm watching the board. Pieces move. Some remove themselves. I swallowed. I didn't ask you to save me. I know, he said, and softer, you never did. Silence unfurled between us. The plant kept photosynthesizing like a professional. The city kept pretending it wasn't complicit. What now, I said, because a future is a thing you say out loud to make it real. Now, he said, you finish your last deliverable, you send it, you leave the building without apologizing to anyone for taking up space in it. I laughed again, emptier. And after that, I go home and practice not existing? He straightened, and the room remembered it had a ceiling. After that, you live without regret long enough to discover that you do not need me. Something in my chest tightened like a fist that had been pretending to be a heart. So that's it, I said. You're over it, over me. The taste changed. Experiment concluded. He held my gaze, unblinking. You are not an experiment. You said I spoiled you, I shot back. Now I'm a palate you can live without. He exhaled once, a sound barely there. You want anger. I want truth. The truth, he said slowly, is that you are ready to walk without the weight I kept taking from you. The truth is that if I keep standing between you and your old hungers, you will build your life around me. And I... He stopped, eyes flicking to my mouth and away so quickly it could have been a trick of light. I do not want a life made of avoidance. Say the other truth, I said, voice too thin to pass inspection. He didn't. Not in the way I wanted. You taste different now, he said instead, almost tenderly. There's less salt. More steel. I hated the shiver that ran through me. Stop reducing me to a menu. If I were reducing you, he said, and the stray heat was back in his voice, we would not be having this conversation here, with the door open. I hadn't noticed the door was ajar until he said it. The angle was ceremonial, enough to remind us of the rules. enough to let the hallway overhear innocence. I stepped back because forward was an ocean I wasn't allowed to cross. So, you're letting me go. I'm letting you choose, he said, and I'm removing myself as the excuse you could use when the choosing gets hard. It should have made me grateful. It made me furious. You keep talking like you're not making a decision for me. A muscle moved in his jaw. If I were making a decision for you, we wouldn't be speaking at all. We stood there, two silhouettes arranged by architecture and a dress code. I wanted to ask him to break the rules he lived inside. I wanted him to tell HR to go to hell and Marissa to pick a different battlefield and Ethan to eat his own concern. I wanted him to say my name like he had in the elevator, like it had a destiny attached. He didn't. He said Miss Park, and the formality hurt worse than any lack of it. The partners will expect your wrap-up note by 6. If you need more time, I won't, I said, and made myself smile, the kind you can frame and hang in a hallway. I'm efficient. I know, he said again, and this time it was almost a plea. I left before I did something unprofessional, like tell the truth. At 6:41 p.m., the floor belonged to the cleaners and the people negotiating with their ghosts. I filed my wrap-up, packed my desk into a tote that had opinions about weight, and said goodbye to the succulent with a dignity it had not earned. Jules hugged me in the hallway and slipped a note into my pocket that I didn't read yet because I wanted to keep something unruined for later. The office looked different at this hour, edges gentler, ambition asleep in its glass cradle. I paused by the window where the city stacked its lights like promises, and for a second I could almost see the version of me who would stay, who would accept quiet rescue, take the advantages disguised as mentorship, become a permanent orbit. I turned away before that girl got a vote. At the elevators, the doors opened onto an empty car. I pressed 29 because muscle memory is rude. When the doors whispered apart, the corridor stretched clean to the far conference room. A figure stood in the glass, a shadow more careful than the others. He didn't move as I stepped out. I did not move toward him. We faced each other across a distance built out of policies and choices. His hands were in his pockets, as if to prove they would stay there. I could not read his expression. The glass layered us in reflections. The present, the could have been, the don't. Good evening, Miss Park, he said, voice even, soft enough to belong to the hour. Goodbye, Mr. Vale, I said, and felt something inside me set. For a fractional second, the mask slipped. Want flared, quick, unarguable. Then it was gone, replaced by the man who knew how to live with rules the way other people live with weather. I stepped back into the elevator. He didn't follow. The doors closed, taking the office, the city, and the man who had rewritten my pulse with a touch out of the frame. By the time I hit the lobby, the anger had cooled into something heavier. I walked into the night and told myself the truth I could tolerate. It had always been a game to him, a practiced appetite, a professional curiosity, a demon's way of passing time between deals. The sky above the river had the bruised blue of promises that don't keep. I stood in it and let the wind make a mess of my hair. I didn't cry. I went home and began to practice not needing a man who could taste my regret and decide when I was allowed to have it. 3 months later, I knew where the good light hit my new office at 3 p.m. I knew which conference room had an unmuted mic that betrayed secrets, which client read decks on their phone, which analyst needed an orange and a joke at 4:30 to keep going. My badge said associate, not intern, and my name sat on a door with an honest-to-God hinge. The plant on my windowsill was alive. So was I. Confidence isn't loud. It's temperature. It's the degree to which your hands don't shake when you press send. It's how you leave a meeting without using the elevator of apologies. I took stairs now, sometimes just to feel the burn and the reminder that altitude can be earned without permission. Park, my manager called from her doorway, halfway through a protein bar. Your draft for Larkspur? Landing in 20, I said, and it did, with just enough sting to feel real. The reply came back, clean. Ship it. No one called my output promising. No one rotated me out to minimize optics. My work arrived, did the job, left its coat on the peg by the door on the way out. At 6:05, halfway through packing up, my phone buzzed. Drinks? Jules. She sent a photo of a patio and 3 empty chairs. My heart did the warm stretch of a muscle that remembers a friend's voice. Rain check, I typed. I have a thing. Work thing or haunted building thing? She shot back. Both, I answered, and turned my monitor off before I could change my mind. The security guard recognized me enough to smile, not enough to ask questions. I took the elevator alone, watched the numbers count toward a floor I hadn't seen since I had left it like a story I was done telling. I told myself I wasn't here for him. I was here for me. If I said it often enough, the sentence grew bones and stood up. The 29th floor was mostly dark. The motion sensor lights woke in stages, like a city stirring from a nap. The rows of desks were tidier than memory. The succulent I'd left behind had a twin now, or maybe it had been replaced by a plant with fewer grievances. I walked the aisle like a person who belonged, which is 90% of belonging. My footsteps had a different sound in this carpet. My shoulders had a different line. New badge looks good on you, a voice said, mild as a scalpel. I turned. Marissa leaned in a doorway like she had been poured into it. A black dress, a low ponytail sharp enough to sign a contract. No tablet tonight, just a glass of water and eyes that missed little. Hello to you too, I said. Burning the civilized hours? Only the necessary ones, she said, pushing off the frame. She eyed my face the way you check a proof for errors. You came back. For a visit, I said. For an outcome, she corrected, because she disliked inaccurate nouns. Rumors travel. Congratulations on the title, thank you. I waited, because Marissa never opened her mouth without a blade inside. She lifted one shoulder. You look taller. Stairs, I said. They work. A breath that almost became a laugh moved through her. If you're here to petition for re-entry, you don't need to. You're on a short list. And if I'm here to see a view I used to mistake for God? Then pick the corner office, she said, glancing down the hall. The reflection's better. She moved past me, then paused. He's different, she said, and the he didn't need a pronoun's clarity. Less, airless, I repeated. He used to starve rooms of oxygen, she said matter-of-factly. Now he opens a window once in a while. Sounds drafty, I said, because humor is how you hold the heat without burning your fingers. She gave me that crescent smile. You did come back for an outcome, she said. Try conference room 7, the glass doesn't lie. Marissa walked away, leaving the ice of her competence and the odd warmth of what may have been respect. I went where she'd pointed. The corridor remembered my shoes. The conference room reflected a city layering itself in dusk. I stood in the doorway watching my outline meet the skyline. Miss Park, said a voice behind me, and the room adjusted itself around a weather system I knew too well. I turned. Kairon Vale stood in the threshold, tie loosened, suit jacket over one shoulder, like a concession to gravity. The light did generous work on his face. He looked like a decision, and a story about the decision. Mr. Vale, I said, because names bring order to moments that want to spill. We looked at each other for a beat that held past and future on its tongue. The last time we'd shared air, he had said good evening, and I had said goodbye, and the door had made a ceremony of closing. Now, in the hush of an almost empty floor, I felt the space between us take inventory of what had changed. You're late, he said, without accusation, and I almost smiled at the way his sentences refused to dress as sentiment. Traffic, I said, and a life. He inclined his head, accepting both. Congratulations, for what? I asked, because I wanted to hear it. Existing without apology, he said, and making rooms behave for you. I let myself smile. I learned from the best oxygen thief. He stepped inside, set his jacket across the chair back, and didn't close the door. His gaze took its time, not devouring, not cataloging, recognizing. We have an offer out, he said. Associate. Westridge follow-on. The partners argued. You let them argue or you let the offer out. Yes, he said, and the ghost of a grin altered the room's tilt. I didn't come here to beg my way onto a payroll, I said. I said I'd come back when I could breathe here. Can you? He asked. I met his eyes. The answer was simple and not. Yes, but not for you. A slow exhale, like a held cord let go. Good. I looked around the room that had introduced me to humiliation and then to resilience. I'm not who I was. I know, he said. You taste different. Stop, I warned, but my mouth was already half a smile. He held up a hand. Steel, he said. Less salt. More warmth. Warm steel sounds like a hazard, I said. It is, he said. To anyone who thinks you'll bend for convenience. We stood with that a while, the kind of silence that plants accept without drama. When I moved to the table, I brushed my fingers along its edge. I got the email about the offer, I said. I came to answer in person. And your answer? He asked, though his face already knew the shape. I accept, I said, and the sentence felt like stepping into a pair of shoes I had earned. He nodded once, the kind of nod that set dominoes falling in rooms I'd never see. Then welcome back, he said softly. Miss Park, not an intern, I said. Not a hunter, he said. The line landed between us, simple and exact, and made the room a friend. I should have left it at that, seal the moment with professionalism, let the future begin at 9 a.m. sharp. But there are doors that open once and then become myth. I stepped toward him before the myth could form. He didn't move. He didn't need to. Up close, the facts of him rearranged the oxygen. Cologne with a patient's spine, a crease at his mouth earned by too many precise sentences, eyes that did not pretend anymore. The distance that had once been weaponized was now a courtesy we could break together. You said you don't protect people from the ecosystem, I said. Don't start with me. I won't, he said. Walk beside me, or ahead, never behind. Deal, I said. And don't thank me, he added, the echo of an earlier warning softened. I won't, I said. I didn't come back for you. His mouth tilted. And yet I agreed. The kiss was not a rescue. It wasn't a collapse. It was an agreement we signed with our mouths because legalese would have ruined it. It began with the hesitation of two people who had spent months learning their edges and then finding that those edges fit. It deepened with the steadiness of a choice made in daylight, even if the room held to dusk. He tasted less like hunger and more like restraint let go carefully. I tasted like coffee that wasn't bitter anymore. His hand found my jaw with a care that had nothing to do with fragility and everything to do with respect. Mine found the back of his neck, where tension has a citizenship, and told it to consider early retirement. When we parted, the air remembered how to be air. He rested his forehead against mine for a second, which wasn't in character for his job description, but was exactly in character for the man. I'll still be demanding, he said. I'll still push back, I said. Good, he said. From the hall, a cleaner's cart squeaked, a small human sound that dragged us back to this very funny earth. We stepped apart like people who paid rent. He picked up his jacket, I straightened my shirt, the plant in the corner kept doing what plants do. Tomorrow at 9, he said. Tomorrow at 9, I echoed. I walked to the doorway, then turned. The city pressed its glittered face against the glass, and somewhere in it, a younger version of me was walking home in the blue bruise of a different night. I wanted to tell her we make it, that the taste changes, that we choose. Good night, Mr. Vale, I said. Good night, Miss Park, he returned. The elevator took me down through floors of sleeping ambition. In the lobby, I texted Jules, change of plan, drinks to celebrate. I have a job, and a story you won't believe. Bring both, she replied. Outside, the air was kind. I stood in it, not waiting for permission, not apologizing to the wind. I had come back to the place that taught me regret and found that I didn't need it to navigate anymore. I started walking, not for him but with the knowledge of him, which is different and better. He would be there tomorrow, demanding like weather. I would be there, warmed steel, not bending, not bitter. Not for you, I thought, smiling to myself. For me. And if you're lucky, beside you.